Hi there guys, got a video on the Maverick today. What I thought we'd do is the same we did with the Impact, and I'll do a disassembly and reassembly and also do a few upgrade parts. Okay, like the Impact, the Maverick is built up of a number of components all bolted together, and the order in which these components go together and their alignment affects how well the rifle works. With the Maverick you have these cock-in linkages, and if they're the wrong length, what will happen is the pellet probe won't be in the right position for the barrel, or you could get it so that the cocking handle won't go all the way back, and therefore you wouldn't be able to cock the rifle. So in this video I'm going to be taking one apart, and then in the next video we'll be putting it back together with a few of my upgrades. So before we begin, I'll just point out some of the things I've already done. Firstly, I've removed both the anti-tamper in the rear reg and in the front reg. Also, I've removed the standard gauges that the Maverick comes with and put in some nice digital ones. And since the cheek piece interferes with the mag, I've already taken that off. But apart from that, it's a standard unmodified rifle. Okay, before we begin, we need to take a few measurements. So firstly, your reg pressure. Note down what regulator pressure you've got, because we're going to be taking the reg out and you have to readjust it at a later date. Standard UK Mavericks are coming between 50 and 55 bar. I've already slightly adjusted mine, my one is running at near 60. The second measurement we're going to need is this measurement here, the distance between this back block here and the front of this block here. Now I've already measured mine with a set of digital calipers, and the measurement between here was 74.7. So I've noted that down. I've also taken the measurement from down here to the rear of the support block, just so I've got two reference points and to make sure we've got the blocks in right. And that measurement there came out to be 92.7. The next measurement we're going to need is the distance between these two blocks here. What I did was I measured from the inside two faces, and that came out at 120.9. And lastly, I measured the distance from this cocking block to this scope block here, so this inside measurement, and that came out to 32.5. Okay, once we have them measurements we can go ahead and start taking things apart. Firstly, we'll degas the rifle, and that's just done by unscrewing the bottle, then giving it a couple dry fires. And now both our gauges read 0. While we've got the bottle and the bottle adapter is visible, I will say that the bottles on these types of bottle adapters are extremely loose. The threads on them flop about like the clappers, and if I'm honest, it does make me a little nervous when I take the bottle off and then put it back on. For such a high pressure, I think the threads are far too loose. And whatever you do, don't put any of those bottle mounted Picatinny rails on there. Resting a bipod on this bottle is a big no-no for me. Of course you do what you want with your rifle, but I have a feeling if you bang the bipod a little too hard, the threads might let go, or over time they'll get even looser. So for me, that's a no-go area. Right, now that that's done, I'm going to take the scope rail off next, and that's just with a 2.5mm Allen key. Once the scope rail's off, we can now take the barrel out. And that's just with a 3mm Allen key and that little grub screw there. The reason I take the scope rail off before we take the barrel out is because the shroud rubs up against the scope mount and I don't want to scratch the shroud. So with the grub screw out, we can just pull the barrel out. Like so. Next we'll go ahead and take the chassis off. That's with a 3mm at the back and a 2.5 at the front. That just lifts off. Now that that's done, I'm just going to take the gauges off. You could leave these on if you want, but it just makes it a little easier to manipulate for the camera. Okay, next up we're going to take the trigger assembly out. There are 3 grub screws down here. That's just taken out with a 1.5mm Allen key. These 3 grub screws just over the pins that we need to push out to get the trigger out. Once the grub screws are out, we can just press the pins out from this side. Okay, so we're going to take this one out first. Then that should release. There is a spring to it as well. Then we're going to take out this next one, and that's just the limit for the sear. And then lastly, press out this one. This one's just the one for the sear. Then we should be able to just shake the sear out, and there it is there. Now that those ones are out, we need to remove this one here. Again, this is just a press pin that can be done with a 1.5mm Allen key. Once the pin's out, this linkage here is now free to move about. Before you go any further, there is a small spring in the back of here that we need to remove so it doesn't get lost. And there it is there. This is just the return spring for this arm here, so that it's always under tension. Okay, now that the pins are out, we can go ahead and take this little boss off. That's just done with a 2.5mm Allen key. Here it is there. Now that the trigger assembly is out, we can start work on this back block. Now for this one, I'm not going to be taking out the safety. I don't think we need to. However, if you do want to get it out, what you need to do, take this grub screw out, then take this screw out, and then slowly pull the safety out or press it out from this side. Be careful, there is going to be a spring and a ball in this hole down in the block. I can't see a reason as to why you'd need to take it out, but just in case you do, bear that in mind. Okay, next up we're going to take the hammer spring adjuster off. That's done with a 2.5mm Allen key. Again, there is a spring and a ball behind this, so a little downward pressure on the power wheel as you take it off will stop it pinging out. And there's the ball with a little bit of grease on it. We can go ahead and take the spring out just with some tweezers. There it is there. Now that the power wheel and the trigger sear is off, we can just shake out the hammer spring and the hammer spring shuttle, like so. As you can see, this is the UK spec, so it's got the lighter, softer spring in it. However, the UK versions do still have the hammer weight, so I'll put that to one side. Next we can go ahead and take the pellet probe out. Now to get the pellet probe out, what you need to do is open the bolt, and in this hole here there should be a point where you can see a little screw. Then when you line that up with the hole, we can just use a 2.5mm Allen key in there and undo it. Then when it's all the way undone, you can just use a pair of tweezers and pull the screw out, like so. Once that's out, the pellet probe should just slide out of the hole. As you can see there, this is obviously a 1771. Put that to one side. This grub screw on the top's just a sealant screw for a drilling in the block. We're not going to be taking that out, and you don't need to take it out to disassemble the rifle. However, I will mention on some guns, this grub screw can be screwed too far in and be contacting the barrel. What this does is stop you from removing the barrel. So if you've already loosened this grub screw and your barrel still won't come out, you might have to try and loosen that one. But under normal circumstances, you shouldn't need to touch it. Okay, now that we've taken everything from the rear block, it's time to move on to these front two. First thing we're going to need to do is unlock the cocking handle. Going to do this by undoing these two 2mm Allen keys here. Before you do any of this, make sure you've got your measurements. Where this block is pinched determines where the pellet probe is in the rear block here. So if these two blocks are too far forward or too far back, it will misalign the pellet probe with the transfer port. So just something to bear in mind and to take your measurements before you take the rifle apart. So like I said before, 2mm Allen key, just take them off. And as you can see there, the rod is held in with a spring. So when we undone them bolts, it sprung back. Once them two grub screws are loosened off, we can pull the rod out. The rod will come all the way back here, so we can go ahead and pull it out. Once the linkage is out, we can go ahead and remove the cocking arm. To do this, it's just a 1.5mm Allen key in this slot here. It's not a separate pin, the grub screw has a shaft on it, as you can see there. And once that's off, we can just pull the cocking arm off. Okay, next thing to do is to loosen these 4 bolts here. These are split clamps, so they're clamping onto the air tube so that we can't unscrew it. We need to unscrew the bottle adapter first so that we can get the 2 blocks off. So that's done with a 3mm Allen key. These can be very tight, so you might need a standard Allen key rather than a screwdriver Allen key. Once the screws are loose, we can move the blocks back slightly and unscrew the bottle adapter. There it comes there. Be careful, there is a very thin, large diameter O-ring in the base of the bottle adapter here. So be careful as you take it out. And once the front bottle adapter is removed, we can simply remove the 2 blocks. Like so. We'll take a closer look at these 2 in a second, but for now we'll put them to one side. Now at this stage, you can see there the inside of the air tube. This on this rifle isn't sealed up, it's just O-ring sealing it, so it should be free to unscrew. So there's the first section there. This is air tube, and then the second one is where your regulator's fitted. The second section can be removed by just unscrewing it. As you can see there, it's sealed with a doughty washer. So we'll just take the doughty washer off. Okay, so that's pretty much the whole rifle disassembled. I want to have a look at the valve and see what's happening in there, so I'm going to take that out. To do that, I'm going to take this thing off first, as you can't get a spanner on this rear nut without taking this off first. That's done with a 15mm spanner and cracking it loose. There it is there. No ring that seals on this face here, but there wasn't any sealant fitted in this rifle. So take a look down there. I don't know how well the camera's going to see it, but there is a hole with a grub screw in the bottom there. I think you can just about see it there. What that is a slow fill for the regulator gauge, so I'm going to leave that installed, and all it does is make it so the air has to travel round the threads so that the gauge doesn't blow out. Probably doesn't need it on them digital gauges, but I'm going to leave it as it is. And lastly, we can go ahead and take out the valve. And that's done with an 11mm spanner. That wasn't super tight. There's the cap coming off. There's a valve return spring. In the base there we see the valve. There we go. Looks very similar to the one found in the crown. Okay, and there's the valve seat in the bottom of the gun there. So for completion's sake, I'm going to take it out. I'm going to use my valve puller tool. Just press it in there. And then pull the seat out. Give it a wiggle. And there it is on the top. And there's the valve seat. When it's in the rifle, the valve goes through the middle. And that delrin piece there seals on that taper. And that's what stops the air leaking through the barrel. When the rifle is fired, the hammer hits this end, it knocks the valve open, air is able to rush through that hole, and that's what pushes the pellet down the barrel. Okay, that's it for the block. It's fully disassembled. We could take the safety out, and we could also pick the X-rings out, but I don't see a need to, so I'm going to leave it like that. Okay, so next up is the regulators and the 2 scope support blocks. Now, there's not much point in taking this apart, but we'll do so for the sake of completionism. So first off, I'm going to remove this delrin piece at the back here. That just unscrews, and on this rifle it wasn't particularly tight. There it is there. If we remove this screw here, that's done with a 2mm Allen key. This is just a cross screw. And once we take that out, we can press out a little spring assembly there. As I said before, I don't think there's any point in taking this out, but it's good to see what's inside the rifle. So that's it for now. There is a pressed in delrin bearing here, however I'm not going to take that out. So I'll put that to one side. Next up is the trigger. I'm going to leave the trigger as it is on my rifle, however we'll cover trigger readjustment in the reassembly video. So for now there's not much point in me taking it off. However, I will be taking off this front block. And that's just done for 2.5mm Allen key in this hole here. There it is, the 2 pieces. And that's that fully disassembled. So we can stick that to one side. Okay, next up is the regs. Now I'm only going to be taking apart one, as I've already covered it in other videos and they are the same. So there's no point viewing the same thing twice. So I'm going to be taking apart this one, and this is the rear regulator. So first of all, remove the adjuster screw, and that's done with a 2.5mm Allen key. You can see there. Next up is the body. We unscrew that with a 5mm Allen key. Take that out, being careful as there's sometimes a Belleville washer stuck to the bottom of the body. Once that's out, we can use a reg puller tool, push it on the piston and pull it out. I'm going fairly fast as I've already covered the Maverick regulators in a separate video. So there's the Belleville stack for a UK spec sub 12. 4 Bellevilles, all paired up. Put that to one side, and that's the regulator fully disassembled. It's the same on the bottle adapter, slightly different housing, but exactly the same regulator. And as I always mention, there is an additional O-ring in the body there. And the last thing to take off is this rear cap. It's only finger tight on this rifle. And there we have it there. This is the back side, so this is connected to the block, and then the other air cylinder is connected here. If you're converting your sub 12 version to an FAC, you can swap the plenum and the air cylinder around fairly easily. Take it apart as I've shown here, then screw the regulator in front of the air cylinder. Then the cap can be put back on this end. And there you have it. This is the configuration for the FAC versions. Very large plenum, and your bottle adapter would just go on the end here. Since a very large plenum is detrimental to a sub 12 version, it's installed in the other configuration. So like I said, we're not going to be taking the bottle adapter regulator out, and I'm going to be leaving the Foster quick fitting installed. Right, so one last thing to have a look at, and that's the hammer spring adjuster. Now the hammer spring adjuster has this screw on the side. That's with a 2.5mm Allen key. If we take that out, in the hole there is a delrin puck. All this screw does is screw down onto that delrin puck and provide a little resistance for the screw. The screw's always got a delrin puck pressing on it, so it shouldn't come loose. So I'll see you in the next one when we reassemble it, and I'll make some minor upgrades. We'll fully realign the gun, and I'll just make some small spring guides and stuff like that. Okay then guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.